annual Torah portion. We this week are going to be looking at Shemini, which is the eighth day, Shemini. That is Vayikra or Leviticus, chapter 9, verse 1, all the way up to chapter 11 and verse 47. Leviticus 9, verse 1 through 11, all the way up to 11, verse 47. And so we talked a little bit about the first half of the Torah portion, Shemini, which is called 8, because in verse 1 of chapter 9, it all begins on the 8th day. We talked about the fact that the 8th day was the day after the 7th day of the consecration of the high priest Aaron and his son. So they were totally consecrated. They went through their 7-day consecration period, and then they began to be the ones that were doing the sacrifices. So we see their first sacrifice. We see the death of Nadab and Abihu. And we see a reason for the Most High to decide to deal with the difference, the distinction between that which is holy and that which is common, between those things which are unclean and those things which are clean. And so let's take a look over in chapter 11, and I want to read probably the second half of chapter 11. Let's start at verse I want to start at verse 29. It's mostly random, but not really. Okay, chapter 11, verse 29 to the end.
Leviticus 11:29. And these are unclean to you among the creeping creatures that creep on the earth, the mole and the mouse and the tortoise after its kind, and the gecko and the land crocodile and the sand reptile and the sand lizard and the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Anyone who touches them when they are dead becomes unclean until evening. And whatever any of them in its dead state falls upon becomes unclean, whether it is any wooden object or garment or skin or sack, any object in which work is done, it is put in water, and it shall be unclean until evening, then it shall be clean. Any earthen vessel which any of them falls, whatever is in it becomes unclean, and you break it. Any of the food which might be eaten, on which water comes, becomes unclean, and any drink which might be drunk from it becomes unclean. And on whatever any of their carcasses falls becomes unclean. An oven or cooking range, it is broken down. They are unclean and are unclean to you. But a fountain or a well, a collection of water, is clean, but whatever touches their carcass is unclean. And when any of their carcass falls on any planting seed which is to be sown, it is clean. But when any water is put on the seed, and any part of any such carcass falls on it, it is unclean to you. And when any of the beasts which are yours for food dies, when he touches its carcass, becomes unclean until evening. And when he who eats of its carcass has to wash his garments, and shall be unclean until evening. And every swarming creature, the one that swarms on the earth, is an abomination. It is not eaten. Whatever crawls on its stomach, and whatsoever goes on all fours, and whatever has many feet, among all swarming creatures, the ones swarming on the earth, these you do not eat, for they are an abomination. Do not make yourselves abominable with any swarming creature. The ones swarming, and do not make yourselves unclean with them, lest you be defiled by them. For I am Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall set yourselves apart, and you shall be set apart, for I am set apart. And do not defile yourselves with any swarming creature, the one creeping on the earth. For I am Yahweh who is bringing you up out of the land of Mizraim to be your Elohim, and you shall be set apart, for I am set apart. This is the Torah of the beasts and the birds and every living being, the creeping creature in the waters and every being that swarms on the earth, to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, between the living creature that is eaten and the living creature that is not eaten.
Okay, very good. So we see over here that the point of this whole thing is given to us at the end. Right? Yahweh, the Most High, he wants for us to be holy, set apart, because he is holy and set apart. And it is necessary, as it says in verse 47, to make a distinction between that which is unclean and that which is clean. It's necessary to make a distinction between all the living creatures that are to be eaten and that are not to be eaten. It's interesting in verse number 39, it says, when any of the beasts which are yours for food dies. There was such a thing as having beasts that were for food. You had beasts that wasn't for food. But there was beef that you had that was for food. Like, we can understand this, I think, probably to an extreme. I wanted to start at the middle just because I happened to look and I saw things like a gecko and a crocodile and a chameleon. Right? We have, in these days and times, we have, and you can have a pig. You can have a pet pig. Pigs are excellent pets. They're kind of like dogs. Pigs are. And by the way, I don't know this from experience. I've never owned a pig in my life. By the way, I've heard it. It's hearsay.
I knew people.
I mean, I know a guy who's had.
I experienced. They call them and just like dogs, like you said. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's excellent. They'll eat anything. They might know their names, but you don't have the right to call a cat. Cats are very snooty. Cats are snooty. They do know their names, but they don't care if you call them or not.
They're not coming.
If they want to come.
I never had a cat.
Yes.
I never had dogs.
But these animals, they have their purposes. They have their purposes, and we don't think of as food.
Right.
There's rats,
This is disgusting.
and they're not food. And so it talks about, you touching these things, but touching them when they are dead. Right? Verse 31, these are unclean to you among them that creep. Anyone who touches them when they are dead becomes unclean. You can touch an animal that has been categorized as unclean when it is alive. But when it's dead, there's the issue. So let's look at I guess go down to 47 and let's look at these words here. Unclean and clean. Look at unclean first. Unclean. Go ahead, pull that up there. Unclean. I want to understand what this word is. Unclean. It's interesting because, this Torah portion actually dealing with the clean and unclean, we touch on some of these issues in the words of the master. Okay, so let's look at this word here, tameh. Tameh, unclean, foul in a religious sense, defiled, polluted, pollution, unclean. Right? And so this word tameh is literally something that is foul, something that is defiled. Let's look at pull up the 1828 on foul. When I think of foul, I think of something that has a stench, something that's out of bounds. A foul to me, I automatically think of out of bounds. What's that word there?
Containing extraneous matter which is offensive, filthy, dirty, not clean, foul cloth, foul hands, foul chimney.
Okay, yes, very good. Filthy, dirty, noxious, offensive, all of these things. But it says there in a religious sense. People don't like that word religious. I'm not one of those people. I want to say that. People don't like that word. I think what we have to understand about tameh is tameh is not dirt. Tameh is not dirt. Not like dust and dirt, things that are actually dirty necessarily. Because when you think about it, the difference between a unclean animal that's alive and one that dies, the minute that is dead, it becomes unclean. However, has it had time to accumulate disease or some kind of nastiness in that instant, in that moment? Did it just automatically, the dirt and decay and whatever foulness just instantly engulf the thing instantly as soon as it became dead?
I mean, you just add that human is an unclean thing when it dies. Person,
Yes, when he dies, right? But a freshly dead human,
almost the same as
he's
a-
instantly tameh.
because you can.
He's instantly tameh.
Dead human back.
Yeah, that is right. CPR. Look at that. CPR, you're dead. You're dead. Somebody comes and they manually pump your heart and they manually fill your body with air. You died, you become technically tameh. But what I'm saying is that does filth and stench and foulness and uncleanness, does it engulf you right there? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it. Oh, go ahead.
It reminds me of the 3-second rule.
3 second rule is totally made up, but yeah, what you're saying, I get what you're
But
saying.
I'm just saying, the concept, people think that it's dirty after it's been on there for a
Yeah.
while, but to your point, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's technically fine. It falls, it doesn't really, it takes time for things to get on it. I'm not sure if it's 3 or 5 seconds. They may have, but I can't remember. I used to watch it all the time. I can't remember. They probably did. They probably validated it.
Oh, yeah.
Did you used to watch it?
Oh, yeah.
You seem like it. I loved it. I loved it.
Anytime there's a germ and something comes in contact with it, it's contaminated instantly.
And those things they reproduce, right? And so I'm saying that just to say, when we think about the idea of Tom May, is a category. It's a categorization more so than it is a actuality. I don't want to say actuality because if something is Tom May, it is Tom May. But we're not dealing with actual dirt, is my point. It's something that is in a classification of being polluted. And something that is in fact dead, in reality it is decaying, right? But it's if it just died, it just began its beginning stages of decaying. So click on look at the ancient of Talmud. You know what I said?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we notice, the word Tameh is a tet, it's a mem, and it's an olive, right? And so the tet is a basket. It's a round container. I don't know how big you can make that. But the tet is that circle with an X going through it there. And what it is it's a basket, right? And so if you have a basket, a container, a bowl, and it's filled with water, and it sits for any amount of time. If you have something that collects water in your backyard, it just sits there and collects water. There's probably all types of spores and things growing in there. There's all types of, that's where, what are those things? Mosquitoes lay their eggs inside of there. It gets really nasty. And so Tameh is, as a picture of this bowl, this sitting bowl of water that just sits and it's stagnant, right? Okay, and so that's Tameh. And so clean, look at clean. Pull up clean, the Strong's for clean, which is tahor. Clean.
Yeah.
Right next to the other one, same verse.
Awesome.
Clean, unclean. 47.
Oh,
It don't matter, wherever you see clean. Definitely have 47. Clean, for Hebrew 2889, which is pure, something that is pure, clean. It's interesting when we think about clean things, we can think about those in various ways, these clean things. But again, when we understand the fact that it's this designation, right? It's this classification where there's things that are associated with cleanness and there's things that are associated with uncleanness, and the various attributes or the things that put that thing in a particular category. When something becomes unclean, it's in that category for a particular time, and time runs out and there's a cleansing, right? You wash and the time runs out, right? It's clean. I mean, it becomes unclean until even, it said, right? And so there's like a time period attached to it, which is something else that helps us to understand this idea of a classification, right? Because this thing has to be washed and it has to, go through its courses, right? And so the Most High here is causing us to be able to understand that there is a distinction that we, as his people, need to understand that we got to not put ourselves in a category, but understand that we belong in a particular category, and it's necessary for us to maintain that category as much as possible. When one that is clean becomes unclean, he strives and works in order to do the things necessary to get back into that clean status, right? And so our baseline is clean, right? We have these situations which may happen, which cause us to become unclean, but we're constantly trying to make it back to clean as a status. And so it's interesting when we think about this in terms of, our life as the people of the Most High, and understanding this distinction, this very important distinction that, just a chapter ago, the Most High killed two people who got this distinction confused. And so, it's an important thing for us to be able to understand this as an idea, understanding that the Most High is in fact holy. Holiness is like unto cleanness. It's not a Bible verse. Cleanness is not next to godliness. It's not in the Bible, but it's true though. It's not in the Bible, but as a concept, it's true. And so the Most High helps for us to be able to understand who He is, His character, in fact, by teaching us this concept of clean and unclean. All right. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions, or comments? Good.
Just that in verse 36, where it talks about the waters becoming, or a collection of water is clean, and the person that falls into it. Just talking about the that word of water, sorry, plenty, where it's the collection, I guess, of mikvah, and the just the concept of the mikvah being a place where there can be a conversion between the the unclean and clean. So if you had the mikvah, and you had something that was unclean going into the mikvah became unclean, then you could never cleanse anything. And so, just the Most High having space of cool water is important.
Yeah. And it's also interesting that when you think about this also as an idea, because when you think about a well, you might think that it's like from from the definition of a well, that it sounds like Tameh.
Yeah, 'cause it's just a thing of water.
However, a well, you dig a well. You dig a well and the water comes from beneath. So it is a collection of water, but it's a collection of water that is renewed. The collection is renewed. So it's not totally a stagnant thing. And it's giving you here a fountain or a well. It is a collection of water, but it's a place of water that is in fact renewed. When they made a mikvah, when they made one, they would have it be at a place where water would come to it and fill it, right? And so it wouldn't be like you have a pool in the backyard where it's filled with water and there's no way for the water to renew. And so even though you think about a well as being a place, you dig a well because there's water that's underneath the ground where the water comes and is renewed. And so I think that that's important in trying to understand the idea, because it's giving you this idea of this clean water, which, when you think about the idea of Tameh, it's stagnant, just as a concept. But yes, and it's also interesting when we think about tahor, which also is a container, right? You still have the text. Here, look at that real quick before we go off of this. The clean one. When you have pull that up there, the ancient tahor, which is a tet and a hay and a vav and a resh. So you still have a container, right? Just like the fountain. You still have a container. But the container, if there's a hay there, is air. There's breath. There's movement, right? And so it's interesting that when you think about the difference between the clean and the unclean, tahor, the man is attached to the movement in the container. Or the container is attached to the man with movement. You have these ideas of movement with air and the breath with the hay. And so when you think about just clean, it's something that flows, right? It's something that moves. It's something that is not stuck.
Yeah. And I also think about anything that doesn't move or isn't full of air, it's something, right? It's not able to change.
Yeah, and I just looked at our neighbor's car that's out back. It's been out back at this point for years. It stopped working, so she stopped moving it. But when that thing sits there and don't move, and the elements hit it, and it's not like, them tires is locked up right now. They've been out there for seasons, rain and salt and everything else back there. It's just stagnant. It's just sitting there. You got, vehicles, they have fluid in it. That stuff got to flow through, or else everything binds up. And so when you think about the idea of being stagnant, there's nothing good about stagnacity. I don't know if that's a word, but it sounds awesome. Stagnation.
Stagnation.
Stagnation. That sounds even better. Okay, very good. All right, so that being said, let us go over to the words of the master. There's much more that could be said about this particular Torah portion, and you could just go ahead and look at the link in the description and see that we have every chapter in the Torah. We've said something about it at one point or another. Right? All right, so let's go.